Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to our latest webcast that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly as part of our continuing Roadmap to Recovery series. And I'm delighted to be joined today by someone familiar to you, Andy Harmer, who is the Managing Director of Clia UK and Ireland, but also Marie Caroline Laurent, who is the Director General for Clia Europe and has only been in that role for a couple of months. So first time joining us on a webcast today. So welcome to you both. How are you?
Very good, Lucy. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, listen, it's great to see you at the start of a new year. Lots, I'm sure, to talk about for the year ahead. But I wanted to just start with where we are now, because obviously towards the end of last year, we were gaining some real momentum, some positive momentum for cruise. We had the successful restart of cruising in Europe and then the US. And then, of course, Omicron emerged, which has thrown a bit of a curveball. And then the CDC in the States issued its advice, to even if you were vaccinated, but you should avoid cruising, which I wondered what your take was on that. Obviously, your colleagues in the States at the time felt it was a bit heavy-handed. They said it was a bit excessive. We haven't really heard much from Clia since then. I wonder if you could just update us on what the association's view is and what's happening over there.
So thank you, Lucy. So obviously, as we have already stated, we were disappointed by the decision and the statement made by CDC. However, we remain in a very collaborative mode with the US authorities. We are still trying to manage the situation on a ship-by-ship basis. We see that operation can continue safely, that our protocols actually are adequate, and that hopefully we can still carry on with our plans and our season for next year. So obviously we were disappointed by that public announcement in the US, which we feel was counterintuitive vis-a-vis all the efforts the cruise industry has made and the good results we have in effect in our operation in protecting our passenger and providing a safe journey. But we are more now looking at the next season and making sure that we can work with the authorities across the globe to secure operation.
Okay, so just perhaps you could explain it for us then, because I mean we've seen that they're saying I think almost 100 ships are being investigated, but my understanding is that kicks in a pretty low threshold of cases, and I think that's something that you as an industry and with the CDC and as association and the cruise lines have all worked together because you want it to be so safe. So I think it's something like one crew member testing positive or 0.1% of the passengers. So I think it sounds bad, doesn't it, when we say, oh, there's all these ships being investigated, but actually is that as bad as it sounds?
No, and this is indeed linked to the color coding system that was put in place with CDC. That is also, in effect, also relying on a voluntary discussion with the authorities in some of the states in the US. And this also, as you say, comes down to the full transparency of our industry in handling the cases. We have very efficient reporting. So as soon as we have a case, we report it. We have the adequate protocol in place to handle them. And this color coding is really just a system to manage the situation and to put in place the right actions. So in effect, we are almost the only industry, tourism industry, that reports so transparently, and also due to the fact that we have recurrent testing. So this is how we know the number, and this is in effect why we speak about the cruise situation, is because we have this transparency and these numbers that we manage and can report.
So in a way, the fact that you're doing more than most other sectors in the travel industry, it's almost sort of come back to bite you in a way, and that's what I think you said, you felt disappointed because cruise had been singled out unfairly.
It is indeed counterintuitive, but de facto, because we do this reporting, because there is full transparency on the number of cases, and because we do regular testing before boarding, but also during the voyage, we are de facto being able to report on our numbers, which maybe other industry are not doing or are not even able to do because they don't have the same protocol in place.
Yeah. All right. I know you say you're focusing now on the season ahead and you're confident about that, and we will come on to that. But just just before we move on, what has the impact been? And I'll come on to ask you as well, Andy, in a second. But has there been a sort of drop off in demand? Have you had people cancelling? Because obviously we're seeing numbers of cruises being cancelled, but we're not clear, are they being cancelled because of COVID outbreaks, or perhaps because so many people have cancelled that they're just not viable to run anymore? It's again quite confusing. And if we're seeing that in the UK, that there's every day I think we're reporting on a line say maybe cancelling or amending a cruise. So what's behind that?
So at a global level, and I will let Andy complement on the UK, in effect, the cancellation or pauses of cruises that we have seen represent 14% of the actual overall activity. So it's not the majority, and maybe the report we see in the media does not reflect the fact that it's only 14% of our overall operation. Still very impactful for our industry. However, it is by far not the majority of the operations that are impacted. It is also about cancellation and postponement. So you will see in some of the cases, it's basically a pause in the voyage to make sure that the protocols can be reinstated, reapplied, and that the voyage then can resume and continue. So this is important to say. I would say that the majority of these cases are due to COVID-related operational constraint rather than cancellation. So we still, from the last sentiment survey we've done, we still have strong numbers that cruisers want to cruise again by a vast majority. I think it was around 80% of the person polled that still wanted to do the cruise, and we even have 60% of non-cruisers that are still interested in taking a cruise as a first time. So we still remain confident. Our passengers are still willing to travel on cruises. We don't see this massive cancellations phenomenon at a global level. On the contrary, up to a few weeks, we still had good numbers for bookings from the next season. So we remain hopeful that the coming season should be better again, provided the further developments on COVID situation, but should be much better than, for instance, the one we just had in 2021.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Andy, let's come to you then. We did a story just this week talking to some cruise specialist agents who were frustrated with the CDC, singling out of cruise. They were quite vocal about how they felt it was unfair because they know how much the cruise industry is doing. But actually, a lot of them said it hadn't really impacted their sales. Lots of questions from consumers and certainly, hit confidence a bit, but not too bad on trading. Is that what you're seeing from your members?
Well, I think what a lot of agents are seeing, we had that great summer of sailing in the UK waters from about May, and we had a lot of people join ships for the first time, or actually, take their second or third or fourth cruise, and people were really keen to get back onto the ocean, and we saw that this summer. And I think people have seen an industry that's been doing the right thing. So, cast our mind back 2 years, we voluntarily suspended operations. We then did that whole piece of work on protocols with governments and health authorities and so on, and really engaged across government, across the health community for these protocols that are now continuing to be seen to be working effectively. So I think the numbers, about 6 million people have now cruised already, and that's incredibly encouraging. And I'm sure they're getting back to their travel agents and explaining what a great holiday that they've had. So similar to Mary-Caroline, we're looking forward to the summer, but also there's huge choice now available of all of those sailings as more ships resume operations around the world.
And you haven't seen, but members haven't seen cancellations or postponements because they've heard the news from the States around cruising in the Caribbean, for example?
Well, I think they look to the protocols that are working effectively. And I think, again, I've repeated myself on protocols, but that's because they go way beyond any other travel or hospitality setting. These protocols that have been developed are really effective. They include testing and vaccination policies that the cruise lines have, sanitization, and all of the things that you'd expect from the cruise industry. Plus, of course, we have medical personnel and medical facilities on board all of our ships. we also have the capability to move them as we need to. So as Omicron spreads around the world, we're able to amend our itineraries and our ports and so on, and to do that effectively, to give people the holiday that they want. And I think we are in a far better position now at the beginning of 2022 than we have certainly been.
And are we seeing that, Andy? Are we seeing quite a few lines slightly changing their programs then to just make sure they're going to areas that have not got quite such high numbers?
Yeah, you know, we're very able to move our ships around. We're taking a very proactive approach to Omicron and the different challenges that's bringing communities and households around the world. So that includes things like enhanced testing. It includes things such as enhanced mask wearing, for example, as well as some of the other measures such as, you know, moving ports or changing ports. But guests on board are still enjoying, of course, their great cruise holiday. And I think that's the message that they're telling their travel agents as they return from their holiday.
Okay, so we don't need to be worried then. I mean, one of my questions was going to be, do you think this advice from the CDC is going to be short-lived and it might drop down again to level 3 quite soon, and when you thought that might happen? But it sounds as if even if it doesn't reduce, you're quite confident that people can still sail and have this great holiday because other things will kick into play to make them feel confident, whether it's changing itineraries, etc.
Yeah, and you know, it's those existing protocols that have been in place since cruising resumed back in August 2020, but it's those additional measures that the cruise industry is taking as well. And I think that transparency point that you mentioned earlier is really important, because actually there's no other part of the travel and hospitality sector that is so transparent. And that's based on the protocols that were in place even before COVID came along, but also additionally due to those protocols that were introduced. So that transparency, I think, is helpful to travel agents who are talking to their customers about booking their next cruise.
Okay. All right. So sorry, please.
Yeah, sorry, Lucy, maybe just a compliment. We're obviously here managing the current season, which is mainly happening in the Americas. And as Andy said, when it comes to Europe, we haven't seen at all a similar reaction from the authorities in Europe than what we've seen with CDC. So to your questions about change of itinerary or change of plan for the next season in Europe that we hope to resume as of March, we're still having the same plan. So this recent announcement have not necessarily changed our plan. So I think our travelers can be reassured that for the upcoming seasons in Europe, we are still looking at having a good program, a good experience, and also the collaboration we've had with governments kind of paid off in Europe, since from the feedback we've received so far, no government, no authority is planning on issuing additional requirements or restrictions on cruising. On the contrary, more trying to help the sector resume to its full capacity.
Okay, brilliant. You've answered my next question, is if we were going to see tighter restrictions in Europe. So well done, fantastic. All right, so let's then talk a little bit about the lobbying and the kind of relations that you have with government. I know, Caroline, you've been at IATA previously, so working in the aviation sector, and then obviously that very different to the cruise sector, or is it sort of quite similar? I know you've only been in this role a couple of months, but certainly we've seen Clia really working so well with the transport department and Robert Courts here in the UK. And I guess, is that something that you feel you've brought a lot of experience, to give to continue that?
Obviously, so I'm obviously thrilled to have joined Clia. So I started on the 15th of November, so still fairly new to this industry. But what I find fascinating is that it's a mixture between the transportation issues, but also tourism, which brings a special flavor to what we do in our discussion with the government. As you said, I have 20 years experience in the transport sector, but more specifically with the aviation sector, where I was more particularly looking at everything around the passenger experience, security of the operations. So obviously my role for my whole career was to liaise very closely with authorities with the purpose of ensuring continuity of the operation, but more importantly also a pleasant passenger experience, which has always been my focus, which I obviously hope to carry through also in the cruise operations. So to make sure that governments not only understand, obviously, the economic impact our activity has on their local communities, but also the need to provide our passenger with the best experience to make sure that we can raise the profile of cruising as a positive experience, not just for the passenger, but also the local communities as well. So hopefully I will be able to support the cruise industry. And again, I'm extremely excited to bring my experience to this new sector.
Yeah, and it's a big role. And I think pre-pandemic, there were lots of issues anyway around sort of sustainability and over tourism and things like that, which we can come on to. But I guess for the immediate period, it's still very much focused on COVID and recovery and coming out of a pandemic. Is that what your immediate priorities and challenges are focused on?
So to be honest, we will stay on the two main priorities. The first one will be resumption, but it will be a sustainable resumption. So meaning we are convinced we will be back into business fully very quickly. All the signs remain positive. Pre-pandemic, the cruise industry was growing significantly. And so our job also and our focus throughout this resumption of the operation with the pandemic is also to come out of this crisis in a more structured, stronger way so we can continue our growth in a sustainable way. And so that's why we have not lost sight of our second priority, which is the decarbonization agenda, which obviously in Europe is extremely important. But so for us, it's important to convey that it's not all about resumption at the moment. It is also continuing our effort on decarbonization that go hand in hand. So we will still have very much these two priorities.
Great. And just remind us where we are up to. Either of you can take this question, but not all ships are currently back in service still, are they? And are ships that are in service, are they now sailing at full capacity, or are we still got some sailing, at reduced capacities whilst we're taking these slow steps to recovery?
I can take that if you want, Andy, or
yes,
if you
why
want
not?
to cover this. So in Europe, at the end of the season, so around November, we had around 220 ships back in operation by the end of the year. So that still represents, I think we were about 62% of our capacity back at the end of the year. In terms of the actual occupation numbers, I think that will very much depend on where the cruising was happening. There were also some restrictions in terms of capacity linked to COVID restrictions, simply to leave some cabins free. So that will also depend a lot on which ship, in which area you were sailing. So that I think we cannot necessarily answer or have an aggregated number for you at this stage on occupancy.
Yeah, and presumably it varied by brand, I guess, as well. They had their own sort of.
Yeah, and there's a requirement within the protocols for that, for some cabins to be left for isolation and quarantine cabins. So there are some restrictions to capacity, but what we are seeing month on month is more ships returning to service. So we expect the vast majority of ships to be operating within the next few weeks or months.
Brilliant. Okay, which would be great to see. And while you're still talking, Andy, because just to continue on the lobbying side of things, I know obviously you work really closely with Clia Europe, but how much of what you have to do has to be slightly in a silo because we're no longer part of the European Union? I mean, do you have to do some things quite separately, and what will your focuses be if that's the case?
Yeah, so the lobbying is of course separate. We're talking to the national government. That relationship we've built with Department for Transport and some of the other departments such as the FCDO, that continues, and they continue to be really important, particularly as we see more ships entering service and as travel restrictions themselves are given a bit more freedom and become a bit more open. So so those conversations with government, particularly around resumption, continue. And then of course separately, in terms of sustainability, the UK government doesn't have to follow the EU sustainability path. It is setting out its own agenda. So we are again working separately on that sustainability agenda, using the expertise that we're very fortunate to have within Clia in Europe or in Washington or around the world that supports us from a technical and a knowledge base. But those conversations are very separate. But, you know, the UK and the EU are broadly running in the same direction, on the same path when it comes.
So you're on the same path, but you have to talk to slightly different people now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
all
our
right.
ships will go also to the same countries. So
Yeah.
even if obviously there is a specific engagement with the UK authorities with regard to UK-based operation, the ships that go to continental Europe, we still have to follow the same European rules. So I think we're fully aligned with Andy on these issues, and it's indeed just interacting with each government in an appropriate way.
So more lobbying, Andy, for you then. Still got to, you've done it for the last couple of years. You've still got to carry on then.
Well, and there's of course still some work to be done. You know, travel is much more open now than it was 12 months ago, but there's still some steps that need to be taken for that full opening up of the skies. Certainly, travel agents I speak to are much more positive about the situation since the change to testing rules came into force. But you know, as Mary-Caroline says, there are countries that we go to who still have restrictions in place, for example.
Yeah, okay. Just talk to us a little bit more about that, though. It was going to be one of my questions. Obviously, it was a big deal, wasn't it, when we had 2 of the testing requirements lifted. We've been talking to travel agents just this morning and talking about what kind of weekend they had, just literally, you know, and we've got quite a mix, but people are definitely feeling more positive. It clearly was a barrier. It was an obstacle if people, you know, the testing before return, particularly if they felt they were going to be trapped in a destination. So that one being lifted has definitely been an obstacle removed. Is that sort of really helped your members, do you think then, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just about the specifics of the testing change. I think it's the whole sentiment noise that's coming from government about travel that's just as important, if not more important. I think travel was certainly not seen as something that the government encouraged for a lot of the last couple of years. And, you know, they said so in interviews and they said so through the media. And I think that sends a certain message to people about booking their holiday. But I think the noise coming from government now is a lot different. I think that change to testing was the catalyst to that. But I think people are now recognize that they can make holiday plans. They can look ahead to being able to travel again. And I think hopefully, and again, I was watching on some of the social media platforms over the weekend and watching some of the noise coming from travel agents about very positive booking weekends or booking days. And hopefully that will continue.
And when you say there's still some more work to do, there are more steps to take and more to open up, what specifically then do you want to see? I mean, the removal of passenger locator forms, or, you know, that's what Jet2 were calling for the other day. What is it that you, both of you, want to see to enable us to get back to how it was in 2019, or we've got to live with COVID, haven't we? So what do you see as the key things you're still looking for in terms of government sort of support to help travel?
Yeah, and I think we have seen from a UK perspective, we've seen a lot of government support and understanding of travel and the cruise sector, and that's developed over the past couple of years. But I think similar issues around the passenger locator form, I think all of these barriers to that that openness of travel are difficult and a challenge for people to understand. So we need some support around that communications. We need some changes to the PLF that I'm sure other people in the travel industry have spoken about as well. And then, of course, you know, once we leave the UK waters, or once we take that flight to join a cruise, we look to other countries for that freedom of accessing their countries into their ports, and to make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, okay.
And I think indeed, so we're looking also primarily at harmonization of the requirements, not having 5 different rules depending on your itinerary. So certainty and clarity and harmonization, especially in Europe. So we would look and call for having a single passenger locator form that can be used and mutually recognized. That's important for cruising voyages. And similarly, harmonization of condition of entry. So there is no stress from our passengers that they might not be able to go back home or arrive to their destination country because all of a sudden the rules have changed. So this is something Clia is part of a coalition at European level with the other travel and transport associations. We're calling very strongly for this harmonization within the European Union first, to be able again to have a better tourism season this year with more clarity for our customer and partners.
And you're confident, Mary-Caroline, that it could come in for this summer, this harmonization? Because I guess, I mean, I dread to think how many different forms and different rules there are across Europe. Do you think that you can align them within the EU?
So we are calling for it. I think we get definitely the support from the European Commission, several of the member states. However, as you well know, this rule remain very national, and there's some different dynamics happening in the different countries. So we're pushing. We're hopeful, let's say.
Yeah.
Whether we're realistic, we don't know, but this is something the industry jointly is calling for. So I think we all agree that this will be a tremendous help for the restart of the season, and we hope the member states individually will hear our message.
Okay, well, we hope. Well, please let us know how you get on with that. Andy, you've got things coming up this year, like your River Cruise conference in Budapest, which is not too far away. How do the sort of different restrictions in Europe affect that, or will it be okay? I mean, that's just one example. You do so much, and I'm sure Clia Europe does as well. So what in terms of your sort of your own Clia plans, then how will that be affected?
Yeah, so our events plan for 2022 is still in place. So we're hoping to announce some new events for 2022. As you know, the majority of those are in the UK, but many involve ships. So again, we're pressing ahead with those. We're of course watching the situation evolve around testing and things like that. And then, of course, we're watching the situation in Hungary for our Budapest event, but that's end of March, so we still have a couple of months. And I think one of the things we've learned over the past couple of years is that things can change very quickly.
Yes.
So, the other good thing about the cruise industry, actually, on that point, is that we are used to complex travel arrangements. So our ships tend to carry different nationalities, going to different ports, often to different countries within the same voyage. And so to Mary-Caroline's point, that helps us as we're sailing around Europe and other places globally. But it also helps us when we hold events in places like Budapest, because, again, we're fortunate to rely upon the expertise within the industry to allow us to understand and better understand what those regulations might look like.
Okay. And please carry on.
Yes, really.
No, I love it. Much better that you're talking than me. Go.
And to end this point, I think at Clia level, at this stage, we are convinced we have the right protocols, we have put in place the right approach, and our plan for 2022 at this stage is to still be very confident in resumption. As Andy said, we're still anticipating 100% of our ship to be back into operation by July or August. And we're holding on to that. And we're making our utmost to make sure this is a reality, working again with governments, but also with travel agents, to make sure that we're all geared and supportive of that full resumption. This is our target. So at this stage, to your point with event, and obviously we're very flexible industry, but we're still working with the plan that we will be back in operation. We will are still planning sea trade in Miami in April. So our plans are still there. And obviously we will adapt depending on the evolution of the situation. But as we've seen with the Omicron variant, also looking at the numbers in South Africa, these things can change extremely rapidly. The wave can pass. We might have another variant that might bring other things. So since we cannot plan, we can only know our own plan, and this is what we are carrying on for the moment.
And with this resumption in the, by the summer, will the protocols like that affect customers on board, like testing before the cruise, on the cruise, wearing masks, social distancing, buffet service, all those things that were brought in, do you see that continuing as a bit of belt and braces to make sure people feel safe, or do you think that will be relaxed as you go through the year?
So today, the European protocols adopted by the EU Healthy Gateway have not changed. So this is also a good sign, and this is something maybe we can repeat, is that despite Omicron, the protocols we are working with today have not changed. So they are deemed solid enough and robust enough to handle the current situation. I don't think we've mentioned it, but still compared to the rate of infection on the shore, for ships, we are only at 1% of occurrence, 1%. So this is much lower compared to the numbers we see on land, on shore. And so this is to be repeated, that in a way, cruising is one of the safest way to take a holiday at the moment. So our protocols are solid and robust. Today, there is no plan to change them in Europe, at least from the government side. There might be a revision in the coming months in preparation for the next season. So we will see.
A revision making them stricter or relaxing them?
And so you would have asked me 2 months ago when I started. The discussion was more on a relaxation. If you ask me today, I'm not sure we can guarantee that, but I feel confident that at least what we have today is the basis we're working with. So whether, and it will be a good news for everybody, just not for the cruising, but if we feel COVID somehow is less or can be managed in a different way and the measures can be relaxed, I think that's something obviously we will see, but we'll have to follow the health advice and see what the situation is.
But Andy, people traveled, thousands of people traveled in Europe and then around the UK with these protocols in place, and it didn't seem to mar people's enjoyment anyway. And in fact, they probably felt safer. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think people came off a lot of the ships and said that the protocols in place on board made them feel safe and made them relax and enjoy their holiday more. What I would say is a lot of these protocols were in place even before coronavirus came along. So if you think about the health screening at embarkation, the sanitization program, the medical facilities on board, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the additional steps that the industry's taken in the last couple of years has been around enhancing those and adding additional layers. And I think we heard from the UK government this week that testing would continue, for example, even in domestic policy. So I think we'll continue to work with government and health experts, but I think people are coming back from their cruise holidays. They know that the steps that we're taking, the measures that we have in place are the right ones, they're measured, and that they are there to make us that safest form of travel.
And do you think there are some things that have been put in place, perhaps around shore excursions and more private tours, or do you think there's some things that have been put in place because of the pandemic that will continue in the cruise sector because it's just been proven to be a better way of doing things that consumers like?
Oh, I think one of the great things about our industry is we've always put customers right at the heart of everything that we do. So actually listening to their feedback, listening to the things that they've liked and not liked, and understanding how they want to take their cruise holidays in the future has been really important. So, private islands has been a feature of cruising for a number of years, and we're seeing more of those opportunities for cruise lines over the next coming years as well. And every time a new ship comes along, there's new features, there's new innovation on board. So, certainly the proactive approach that the industry's taken to COVID, I think, will continue over the foreseeable future.
And we've got lots more ships coming this year, haven't we? I mean, this is the whole thing. Everyone thought, I know some have been delayed because the shipyards were closed, and we had a lot of that for the last couple of years, but we have got a few coming into service, and we should be excited about that.
We should. I think there's something like 16 new ocean ships this year alone. We also have a new set of river ships coming as well, and some of those based on rivers that we haven't really seen river cruising in the past. I think, the great thing about the cruise industry is we really have continued that investment in new ships, in new features, in new areas of sustainability, but also, new ways of people enjoying their holiday. And I think we should be very excited about the opportunities ahead. The itineraries look amazing. The ships, of course, have always delivered fantastic service and holidays, but we have new ships coming, as you say. So lots to look forward to for 2022.
And we'll give
to the point of our sustainability. And just linking this to our second priority at equal level, the sustainability. So new ship also mean they're more efficient. We also see an increased investment into cleaner propulsion of our vessels as well. So this also goes hand to hand, and hence or double priorities that I was mentioning is resumption, but it's a more sustainable resumption that will allow us to grow. So we see our capability in, for instance, LNG propelled ship that will grow to 52% in the coming years with the new ship. Shoreside electricity capability will also be vastly deployed across our ships. So both, again, to the benefit of our passenger, but also of the local communities we visit. I think we can be very proud of that process, that we have not dropped the ball with COVID on that decarbonization agenda, and can still come out of this with a better, more structured, and also more sustainable operation.
Brilliant. All right. Well, look, we'll leave it there. It's so good to talk to you both. It's so good to hear you so positive. I know it's been a tricky couple of years, but it does sound like there's lots going on. You've clearly not taken your foot off the gas, both in terms of your lobbying and talking to all the authorities, and with your plans as an industry for the future, which we're very excited about. So for now, I'd really like to thank both Marie-Caroline from Clia Europe and Andy Harmer from Clia UK and Ireland. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.